I'm doing a presentation on a phishing analysis. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Sarah. I'm a third-year CSEC major. I'm doing a music immersion and a music and technology minor. So I play the bass trombone. I've been playing it for a lot of years now. My security interests in particular are in reverse engineering and malware. And I am the lead for the malware reverse engineering mentorship group. So the basis of the presentation comes from the fact that I did my summer co-op at RIT's Information Security Office over the summer. So I did a wide variety of different things, but there was one thing that I wanted to highlight today, and that was analyzing a phishing email attachment. So in this presentation, we're going to go over what phishing is, some background on the email itself that we'll be looking at, analyzing this email, and then some closing comments. So first things first, what is phishing? So there's 3 parts to phishing. So the information that the adversary or the bad guy wants, the way that they get in contact, and how they disguise themselves. So the first thing is motivation. The adversary obviously wants something, whether it's a password or credit card info, banking info, social security numbers, anything sensitive that can be used to personally identify you or to get access to accounts that you may have. So the second thing is a way to get this information. So they know what they want, now they have to get this information. So this can be used through either email, a phone call, or text message. And this is how they'll be in contact with you. And now they need a way to convince you to give them your information. Because if they were to just email you and be like, hey, I want your password for your bank account, you're not going to give it to them. So the way that they do this is coming up with a way to disguise themselves as a legitimate vendor. So this is things like bank account or banks, law firms, popular websites like Amazon or Facebook. If you've seen emails from Facebook saying, hey, someone got into your account, click this link to reset your password, you're a lot more likely to click that link than with the previous example that I just mentioned. So now we know the adversary has sent to phish. How do we catch this fish? How do we not fall for this? So the first obvious one is things like grammar, spelling, spacing issues, or the language is just a little bit off. So it's easy to spot if you're observant, if you're awake. If you're groggy at 3 in the morning and you're looking at your phone screen 2 inches from your face, you're probably not going to catch these things. But if you're observant, they're pretty obvious. They're also pretty vague and may exude a sense of urgency. So requesting a response within 24 hours or as soon as possible as an incentive to get you to do what they want. If they're posing as a recruiter or if they're offering a job, the offers will seem too good to be true. So if they're offering you like $100 an hour to do organizational activities for some company, it's probably not legit. Emails may contain attachments such as PDFs or Word documents, which can be laced with macros, or they can execute arbitrary code, things that you don't want to click on. So don't open any attachments from someone you don't trust or don't know. So let's look at some examples. So this one came from a compromised RIT account. In the body of the email, you see there's a statement that says, part-time job with a weekly pay of $500 US dollars. So if you do the math and you work 20 hours a week, you'd be paid $25 an hour for you don't even know what, because they didn't tell you what you would be doing, which is a little bit on the high side. And there's no information as to what you're going to be doing on this job. And they ask for you to respond to the non-educational email address, which is suspicious in and of itself. And then it's signed with academic career opportunity, which just isn't a way that people sign off on emails. So that should throw up a red flag for you. And most importantly, it was flagged as spam, a large red bar that says, this seems dangerous. You should probably think it's probably dangerous. So another email says from Career Services. They tried a little bit harder than the last one. They had a convincing-ish signature, often common with faculty or other students even having legitimate links, rit.edu/career services, or ones that at least look legitimate. The language is a little bit awkward. Part-time student to do some SEO. SEO is not a job in and of itself. The Word document attachment is a little bit suspicious. They said go click this, it's probably laced with something that you don't want on your machine. And the gray box up here is because I personally flagged this as spam. I was not about to click on anything in here or investigate it further. So let's look at the email that I found on the job. So this was from an RIT staff member. It looks like it's from a legitimate law firm with either a spoofed email or a compromised email account. There's some grammar and spacing issues. On the surface, it might not look too bad, but if you look closely, there are some little things that rub you the wrong way. There's a little bit of a sense of urgency. They say legal actions by the 7th of June, which is about a day after this email was sent. And then if you look at this attachment up here, it's a .shtml, which we'll get into a little bit later, but that's not a common email attachment. Typically, it's a PDF or a Word document, an Excel sheet, something like that, not as HTML. The HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and then the S means that it contains server-side includes. So this is indicative that it's sending something back to some server, which you really shouldn't see in an email like this one. So let's take a look at this attachment. The first thing that we need to do is create a safe environment. We're opening something that we don't know what it's going to do when you open it. So I decided to run this in VMware because I already had a dedicated machine to do this. I had a box that was ready to go. So the first thing that I did after that was to disallow internet connection. You can do this in VMware settings, and then also in the box itself you can see it's been disconnected, so it's not going to communicate to the internet. And then there's no personal info on this box in case anything were to get out. And you always have a clean snapshot to revert back to in case it completely messes up your box. You have a clean one to go back to, and that way you don't ruin your box. So let's download this attachment. So now we have a disconnected VM. So now let's download this to the host machine. How do we make sure that we don't compromise our host machine? One thing that you can do is edit this extension. So instead of downloading it as an SHTML file, you can download it as something that your operating system doesn't recognize. So something like .aza. It's not a valid file type. Windows doesn't recognize it. It's not going to execute whatever's in that file. So prevents accidental execution in case you were to accidentally double click on it on your host machine. So let's drag and drop this into the VM and see what it does. So we open this in a text file, and this is what we're working with. It didn't try too hard. It's not obfuscated in any way. This is a lot to look at, and we're going to pick this apart a little bit. So these are some of the things that we're going to highlight. First thing is some little things to start off. The first is language equals JavaScript. If you didn't get that from the syntax, it literally just says language equals JavaScript. And then the second thing is this let ZHE, which is a variable, and they assign that to the email at rit.edu. So it's hard-coded, so you know that this is a spear phishing email. So spear phishing is targeted towards one individual instead of spread out amongst many individuals. The next thing, we open up CyberChef. There's this long string, and we don't know what it does. So I decided to use CyberChef. I put it in this input box, and then I used their little magic function. So if you didn't know what this was, you could use the magic function, and it would automatically try a bunch of things to see if anything sensible comes out of it. What's up? What's CyberChef? CyberChef is a great tool if you have like encryption, decryption, encoding, decoding, that type of thing. So if you have some sort of string that you don't know, it may be encrypted or encoded, you can use that and then try to figure out what scheme it's using. So CyberChef found that this was URL decode. That was the big block of text that we didn't know what it was doing. And the next, this is the output. It comes out human readable, so it's probably URL decode. And there's this little bar up here. It's very, very long. So I wasn't about to put all of that on the screen, but we'll find out later what that does. So the last part of this is Telegram. These are some lines of code that I picked out from the large bundle in that text editor. So we're going to kind of go through this a little bit. The first one is this emailgrab.textcontent equals the ZHE, which we earlier defined as email@rit.edu, which is just going to be placed in here. That's what this $sign and then these brackets mean. That's just going to be placed in there. So what happens when we do that? Adobe email address equals email@rit.edu. We can do this with this YXZ variable. That's going to be placed in here. So then I did that with the rest of these variables. It's the same process. You take it, you plug it in. So what you ultimately get is this function here, which is Telegram API. If you don't look it up, you can kind of pick it apart. This first one is send message, so it's probably the function that's being called. This next one is that XYZ variable, which is probably an identifier so that Telegram knows where to send this message. And then this here is the message to be sent. So you can see the hard-coded email, email@rit.edu, and the user entered password also gets sent. So let's actually run this attachment. First thing we notice is it opens up a web browser. And up here in the address bar, it has what looks like some sort of URL, but it isn't. It's a file path. Specifically, it's the file path to wherever I ran the attachment. In this case, it was on my desktop. So it was file, home, user, desktop, and then the attachment itself. So then we have this little alert in the middle, authentication required, click OK to continue. If you were to actually fall for this, if you didn't notice what was in the address bar, there's also some spelling, capitalization issues in there that should probably throw a red flag for you. And then this little thing at the bottom, looking up whatever that is, and whatever was spit out from the cyber chef, it's likely an image of some kind. So let's hit that OK button. Let's see what it does. What it does is it spins up this fake email or fake web page asking for a password. This image was this background image, which is very similar to the legitimate background image that you would see on a screen like this. Has the hard-coded email in it, has enter password for downloading a PDF. A little fun fact, there's that arrow was like an animating arrow that would just point down. A little bit of an eye catcher there. I didn't actually input anything, mostly because there's nowhere to send it to. And if I were connected to the internet, then it would actually send that off, and that would indicate to the adversary that there was activity with the phishing email and that it was successful. So what happened if I actually put in a password into this field is, and then click continue, it would bring up an error message and say, oh, authentication failed, and then you'd be out of luck. You wouldn't have your PDF, and you have your password stolen. And then another little fun fact, if you didn't put anything in this field and then hit continue, it would pop up an error message saying, hey, you need to put in a password. So it's little things like that that this adversary put into their code. So let's look at some closing comments, just some things to pull from this. Phishing is very common and unavoidable. If you haven't gotten a phishing email or a text message, it's very unlikely that you haven't. So learn to recognize the common phishing techniques that I mentioned earlier. If there's spelling errors, if it's too good to be true, it's probably not legitimate. Don't click on attachments from someone you don't trust. If you see a suspicious looking email and there's an attachment on it, don't click it unless you have some sort of safe environment if you want to analyze it further. And then handle suspicious files with caution. So you never know what those files will do. So make sure that you handle them with caution and make sure not to give the adversary any clue that you're looking at it. And that's it, if anyone has any questions.
So what service were they trying to get credentials for?
So this was for Adobe. Typically, if you're like an RIT student or staff member, that will be the same login as your RIT account. So effectively, the adversary was trying to get at this individual's passwords so that they could get into the RIT account and then do who knows what with it. Any other questions?
Yeah, so what was this original payload, if you don't mind me asking? Like,
Yeah.
was this a PDF or-
So it was a .shtml file. So effectively what that did is it just opened whatever it wanted in a web browser.
Right.
And then,
And
they,
then you can execute.
Mhm. Yeah.
Interesting. Like, did you look at any? And I know it was just really cool that you just like decrypted the entire payload and you found all the requests. But I was wondering if you can like even do some like proxying, so using like minimum proxy or like the burp proxy on the web browser.
Yeah.
Kind of like see those actual web requests going without affecting your system.
Yeah, you could definitely set up a proxy and then do that without actually sending anything over.
Did you do any like it's called like Word, like Office macro reversing at all?
No, this one was just SHTML. It wasn't a Word document. And so all of their code was just in there.
Right.
So you could just look at it through there. There wasn't anything like that in there. It was a simple spin up a fake web page, ask for credentials, and then send them off. Any other questions? Thank you.